Mara Voss wiped the grease from her hands with a rag that had seen better days, tossing it onto the cluttered workbench behind her. The hum of the repair bay filled the air, a symphony of grinding metal and hissing hydraulics that had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. Her son, Jax, sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, his small fingers deftly dismantling a broken hollow projector. At 8 years old, he was already showing a knack for tinkering that rivaled her own. She watched him for a moment, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. He had her dark hair and her stubborn streak, but his father's curious eyes, always wide, always searching, as if the universe held secrets only he could uncover. "Jax, don't forget to clean up before dinner," she called, her voice carrying over the din of the repair bay. He nodded absently, his attention already absorbed by the next piece of tech in his hands. Mara sighed, shaking her head. She loved the kid more than anything, but keeping him out of trouble was a full-time job. Between her shifts at the repair bay and making sure Jax didn't accidentally blow up the house, she was running on fumes. Still, she wouldn't trade it for anything. He was her anchor, her reason for pushing through the long days and sleepless nights. The Zeta-9 star system wasn't much to look at, a backwater colony on the fringes of civilized space, where the stars were dim and the opportunities even dimmer. But it was home, and Mara had carved out a life here, one wrench turn at a time. She was good at what she did, and her reputation as the best mechanic in the system meant she never lacked for work. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept a roof over their heads. That was enough. When the comm unit on her belt buzzed, she almost ignored it. The last thing she needed was another emergency repair call. But something about the urgency of the tone made her pause. She tapped the device, and a holographic message flickered to life in front of her. It was from Old Man Haskins, the junk dealer who ran the scrapyard on the edge of town. His face was pale, his usual gruff demeanor replaced by something akin to fear. "Mara, you need to come down here. Now, it's about Jax." Her heart skipped a beat. "What about Jax?" she demanded. But the message was already cutting out, leaving her with nothing but static. She cursed under her breath, grabbing her tool belt and slinging it over her shoulder. "Jax, stay here," she said, her voice firm. "I'll be back soon." He looked up, his brow furrowed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she lied, forcing a smile. "Just some junker drama. I'll handle it." She ruffled his hair before heading out the door, her mind racing. Haskins wasn't the type to panic over nothing. If he was worried, something was seriously wrong. The scrapyard was a sprawling maze of rusted metal and discarded tech, a graveyard for ships and machines that had outlived their usefulness. Mara navigated the labyrinth with practiced ease, her boots crunching against the gravel as she made her way to Haskins's shack. The old man was waiting for her outside, his arms crossed and his expression grim. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice sharp with worry. Haskins jerked his head toward the shack. "Inside. Now." She followed him, her unease growing with every step. The interior of the shack was cluttered with salvaged parts and half-finished projects. But her eyes were drawn to the object on the table in the center of the room. It was a strange, angular device, its surface etched with symbols she didn't recognize. It pulsed faintly with a soft, blue light, as if alive. "What is that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That," Haskins said, "is trouble. Jax found it in the scrapyard earlier. Said it looked interesting. Next thing I know, he's messing with it, and..." He broke off, shaking his head. "Just watch." He tapped a button on the side of the device, and a holographic recording sprang to life. Mara's breath caught in her throat as she saw Jax, his face lit with excitement as he fiddled with the device. There was a flash of light, a sound like a thunderclap, and then he was gone. The device fell to the ground, its light fading to a dull glow. Mara's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. "Where is he?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. "I don't know," Haskins admitted. "But that thing, it's not from around here. I've seen a lot of alien tech in my time, but nothing like this. It's old, powerful, and it's linked to something bigger." Mara's mind raced. She had to find Jax. But how? The device was her only clue. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands. The symbols on its surface seemed to shift and change, as if taunting her. She didn't have time for riddles. She needed answers. "Can you track it?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Haskins hesitated. "Maybe, but it's risky. If this thing is what I think it is, messing with it could attract the wrong kind of attention." "I don't care," Mara snapped. "Jax is out there somewhere, and I'm not leaving him. Help me or get out of my way." The old man studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but you're not going to like what we find." Together, they worked through the night, piecing together what little they could about the device. It was a gateway, Haskins explained, a relic from an ancient civilization that had mastered interstellar travel long before humans had even left their home planet. But it wasn't just a tool, it was a key, one that could unlock pathways to other star systems. And Jax had accidentally activated it. By dawn, they had a lead. The device had left behind a faint energy signature, one that pointed toward a nearby spaceport. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Mara packed a bag with supplies, her mind already racing ahead to what she would do next. She didn't have a plan, but she didn't need one. All that mattered was finding Jax. As she stepped out of the shack, the first light of dawn painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Haskins stopped her with a hand on her arm. "Be careful, Mara. This isn't just about finding Jax anymore. That device, it's dangerous. And there are people out there who'll kill to get their hands on it." She met his gaze, her eyes hard. "Let them try." With that, she turned and walked away, her resolve as unshakable as the stars above. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew one thing for certain. No one was going to stop her from bringing her son home. Not smugglers, not ancient artifacts, not the entire galaxy. She was a mother on a mission, and heaven help anyone who got in her way. Mara's boots clanged against the metal ramp of the Starblade, a battered freighter she'd borrowed from the spaceport. The ship was a patchwork of mismatched parts, held together by sheer will and a few well-placed welds. But it would do. She didn't need luxury. She needed speed. The energy signature from the artifact had led her here, to the edge of the Zeta-9 system, where the smuggler's trail began. The cockpit was cramped, the controls unfamiliar, but she didn't have time to second-guess herself. Jax was out there, and every second counted. The Starblade shuddered as it broke Atmo, the stars stretching into streaks of light as she punched the hyperdrive. The artifact sat on the co-pilot's seat, its faint glow a constant reminder of what was at stake. Mara's hands tightened on the controls, her jaw set. She wasn't a pilot, but necessity had a way of sharpening skills. The ship's sensors pinged, picking up the faint trail of the energy signature. It led to the Alpha 4 system, a lawless region known for its black markets and warring factions. Perfect. The journey was short but tense. Mara's mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. What if Jax was hurt? What if she was too late? She shook her head, forcing the thoughts away. Fear wouldn't help her now. She needed to stay sharp, stay focused. The Starblade dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Alpha 4 system, and the sight that greeted her was chaos. The system was a sprawling mess of derelict ships, makeshift space stations, and debris fields. It was the kind of place where people went to disappear or to be forgotten. Mara scanned the area, her eyes narrowing as she spotted a cluster of ships near a dilapidated space station. The energy signature was strongest there. She guided the Starblade closer, her heart pounding in her chest. The comms crackled to life, a gruff voice cutting through the static. "Unidentified vessel. State your business." Mara hesitated for a split second before responding. "I'm looking for someone. A boy, 8 years old. He might have been brought here." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "You're in the wrong place, lady. This ain't no daycare." Her grip on the controls tightened. "I'm not asking. Tell me where he is, or I'll tear this place apart myself." The laughter died, replaced by a cold silence. "You've got guts, I'll give you that, but guts won't save you here. Turn around while you still can." Mara's lips curled into a grim smile. Not a chance. She cut the comms and steered the Starblade toward the space station, her mind racing. She didn't have a plan, but she didn't need one. She'd improvise like she always did. The ship docked with a jarring thud, and Mara grabbed the artifact, tucking it into her bag. She didn't know what it was capable of, but she wasn't about to leave it behind. The station was a maze of dimly lit corridors and rusted metal, the air thick with the smell of oil and decay. Mara moved quickly, her senses on high alert. She didn't have to wait long before she found trouble. A group of smugglers rounded the corner, their faces hard and their weapons drawn. They stopped short when they saw her, their leader, a hulking man with a scar running down his cheek, stepping forward. "You lost, sweetheart?" he sneered. Mara didn't flinch. "I'm looking for my son. You've got him. Hand him over, and I'll let you live." The smugglers laughed, but it was a nervous sound. There was something in her eyes, something that made them hesitate. The leader recovered quickly, his sneer returning. "You've got a lot of nerve, coming here alone, but you're out of your depth. We don't take kindly to trespassers." Mara's hand slipped to the wrench at her belt. "Neither do I." The fight was short and brutal. Mara moved with a ferocity that left the smugglers reeling. She wasn't a soldier, but she was a fighter, and she had everything to lose. The wrench cracked against bone, the artifact's glow flaring as she swung it like a weapon. By the time the last smuggler hit the ground, Mara was breathing hard, her knuckles bruised but her resolve unshaken. She searched the smugglers' pockets, finding a datapad with coordinates to a mining colony in the Beta 7 system. Her heart sank. Jax wasn't here. He'd been moved, but she was getting closer. The Starblade roared to life as Mara set course for the Beta 7 system, her mind racing. The mining colony was a hellhole, a place where people went to die. But if Jax was there, she'd burn the place to the ground to get him back. The journey was a blur, the stars outside the cockpit window a reminder of how far she'd come, and how far she still had to go. When the Starblade dropped out of hyperspace, the mining colony came into view. It was a bleak, barren place, the surface scarred by deep pits and towering machinery. Mara's stomach churned as she guided the ship toward the colony's landing pad. She didn't know what she'd find here, but she couldn't afford to hesitate. The colony was worse up close. The air was thick with dust, the ground littered with debris. The workers, thin, haggard figures in tattered uniforms, watched her with hollow eyes as she made her way to the central hub. She didn't have to ask where the overseers were. Their voices carried over the din of machinery, sharp and cruel. Mara's hand tightened around the artifact as she approached the hub. She didn't have a plan, but she didn't need one. She'd make one up as she went along. The door slid open with a groan, revealing a room filled with smugglers and overseers. They turned as one, their faces a mix of surprise and anger. "Who the hell are you?" one of them barked. Mara stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room. "I'm looking for my son. You took him. I want him back." The room erupted into laughter, but it died quickly when Mara pulled the artifact from her bag. Its glow filled the room, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The smugglers' eyes widened, their greed outweighing their fear. "That's ours," one of them said, stepping forward. "Hand it over." Mara's lips curled into a grim smile. "Come and take it." The fight that followed was chaos. Mara moved like a force of nature, her every action fueled by desperation and rage. The artifact's glow intensified, its power surging as she wielded it like a weapon. By the time the dust settled, the overseers were gone, and the workers were free. Mara stood amidst the wreckage, her chest heaving. She didn't have time to celebrate. Jax wasn't here, but she was closer than ever. The artifact's glow pulsed in her hand, as if urging her forward. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't stop until she found her son. The Starblade lifted off, leaving the mining colony behind. Mara's eyes were fixed on the stars, her resolve unshakable. She was a mother on a mission, and nothing in the galaxy would stand in her way. The Starblade shuddered as it exited hyperspace, the Gamma, 12 system looming ahead like a predator waiting to strike. Mara's hands tightened on the controls, her knuckles white. This was it, the final stretch. The artifact's energy signature had led her here, to a heavily fortified stronghold orbiting a desolate moon. The place was a fortress, bristling with turrets and patrolled by sleek, menacing ships. It was the kind of place that screamed danger, but Mara didn't care. Jax was here. She could feel it. She guided the Starblade into the shadow of a nearby asteroid, her mind racing. She couldn't just charge in. She'd be blown to pieces before she got within a kilometer of the stronghold. She needed a plan, something clever, something bold. Her eyes fell on the artifact, its glow pulsing faintly in the dim light of the cockpit. It had gotten her this far. Maybe it could get her the rest of the way. Mara's fingers danced over the controls, pulling up a scan of the stronghold. The place was a maze of corridors and chambers, but one area stood out. A heavily shielded section deep in the heart of the structure. That had to be where they were keeping Jax. She just had to get inside. The artifact hummed in her hands as she activated it, its symbols shifting and swirling like living things. She didn't understand how it worked, but she didn't need to. She just needed it to do what she wanted. Closing her eyes, she focused on the stronghold, on the shielded chamber, on Jax. The artifact's glow intensified, and for a moment, she felt a strange connection, as if the device was reading her thoughts. Then, with a flash of light, the Starblade was gone. Mara blinked, disoriented. She was no longer in the cockpit. She was standing in a dimly lit corridor, the walls lined with alien technology she didn't recognize. The artifact had teleported her inside the stronghold. A grin spread across her face. This was going to be fun. She moved quickly, her boots silent on the metal floor. The corridor was empty, but she could hear voices ahead, gruff, impatient voices. She pressed herself against the wall, peering around the corner. 2 guards stood at a junction, their weapons slung over their shoulders. They were laughing, oblivious to the danger creeping up on them. Mara didn't hesitate. She stepped out from the shadows, her wrench in hand. The first guard went down before he even saw her. The second barely had time to raise his weapon before she disarmed him with a swift kick. He lunged at her, but she sidestepped, bringing the wrench down on the back of his head. He crumpled to the ground, unconscious. She dragged their bodies into a nearby storage closet, her heart pounding. She was getting closer. She could feel it. The stronghold was a labyrinth, but Mara's instincts guided her like a compass. She avoided patrols, disabled security systems, and slipped past guards with a skill that would have made a seasoned spy proud. The artifact's glow was a constant presence, its hum a reminder of the power she carried. She didn't know how much longer it would last, but she didn't care. She was so close. Finally, she reached the shielded chamber. The door was massive, reinforced with layers of metal and energy fields. It was impenetrable, or so they thought. Mara placed her hand on the artifact, focusing on the door. The symbols on its surface shifted, and with a low hum, the energy fields flickered and died. The door slid open with a groan, revealing the chamber beyond. Her breath caught in her throat. Jax was there, sitting on the floor in the center of the room. He looked up as she entered, his eyes wide with surprise and relief. "Mom!" Mara rushed to him, dropping to her knees and pulling him into a tight embrace. "Jax, are you okay? Are you hurt?" He shook his head, clinging to her. "I'm fine. I knew you'd come." She held him for a moment longer, her heart swelling with relief. But there was no time to waste. She stood, pulling him to his feet. "We need to go. Now." The artifact's glow flickered, and Mara's stomach dropped. It was running out of power. She didn't know if it could teleport them out of here, but she had to try. She activated it, focusing on the Starblade. The symbols shifted, the hum grew louder, and then the artifact went dark. Mara cursed under her breath. They were trapped. The sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor, growing louder with every second. Mara's mind raced. She couldn't fight her way out, not with Jax in tow. She needed another plan. Her eyes fell on the chamber's control panel. Its screens filled with data she didn't understand. But Jax did. "Jax, can you do anything with that?" she asked, nodding toward the panel. He hesitated, then nodded. "I think so." She handed him the artifact, and he immediately went to work, his small fingers flying over the controls. The screens lit up, displaying schematics of the stronghold. Jax's brow furrowed in concentration as he tapped away, his movements confident despite the chaos around them. The footsteps were closer now, just outside the door. Mara positioned herself in front of Jax, her wrench raised. She wouldn't let them take him again. The door slid open, and a dozen armed guards poured in, their weapons trained on her. Mara braced herself, ready to fight to the last breath. But before the first shot could be fired, the stronghold shook violently, the lights flickering. The guards stumbled, their weapons lowering in confusion. Jax grinned up at her. "I rerouted the power. The whole place is going to blow." Mara's eyes widened. "You did what?" "We need to go," he said, grabbing her hand and pulling her toward the door. The guards were too disoriented to stop them as they ran, the stronghold shaking around them. Alarms blared, and the air grew thick with smoke. Mara's heart pounded as they raced through the corridors, the walls trembling with the force of the impending explosion. They reached the docking bay just as the first blast rocked the stronghold. The Starblade was still there, its engines humming as if waiting for them. Mara didn't question it. She shoved Jax into the cockpit and climbed in after him, her hands flying over the controls. The ship lifted off just as the stronghold erupted in a blinding flash of light, the shockwave sending the Starblade spinning. Mara fought to stabilize the ship, her heart racing. When they finally broke free of the debris field, she let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Jax was safe. They were both safe. She turned to him, her eyes softening. "You okay?" He nodded, his grin fading as he looked at the artifact in his hands. "Mom, this thing, it's really powerful, and there are people who want it. Bad people." Mara's jaw tightened. "I know, but we'll figure it out. Together." The Starblade soared through the stars, leaving the wreckage of the stronghold behind. Mara didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew one thing for certain. No matter what challenges came their way, she would face them head-on. She was a mother, a fighter, and now a conqueror. And she wasn't done yet.